Hello. Welcome to North Country History with Rob Berg. This is Rob, and this week we are going to explore the history of Gooseberry Falls State Park, the CCC along Minnesota's North Shore. So settle in, sit back, and enjoy. North Country History with Rob Berg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. In August 2025, I visited Gooseberry Falls State Park as part of my 2025 podcast tour. This was kind of near the end of my tour. I'd been through much of Minnesota already, had stayed in Ely, which will be in another episode, and the Superior National Forest. But then I made a specific stop here at Gooseberry Falls because I wanted to see the magnificent stonework done by the CC boys during the development of this state park. I had briefly stopped at Gooseberry Falls in 2005 on a vacation in northern Minnesota, again after having been in Ely, Minnesota. But at that time, I didn't know the history of the park, nor did I even have much time to explore it. It was basically a restroom stop. The visitor center is right up by the road, so I stopped up there, used the bathroom, looked around real quick, and thought I'd have to come back here at some point, but then I forgot about it. I drove back to Michigan then that day. I got home really late that night. But I learned more about Gooseberry Falls later and saw images of the stonework that was done there by the CCC. This would have been in 2014. I was developing a presentation on the work of the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps in the Great Lakes region, for a session I did at the 2014 Fall MOMCC conference. So MOMCC is Midwest Open Air Coordinating Council. It's a lot to say, so MOMCC for short. It's an outdoor living history museum, a group in the Midwest that I was a member of. After that, I really wanted to be someplace I wanted to go. I highlighted it as part of the presentation. So I knew I wanted to go back there again. And I didn't get that chance until 11 years later, this past August, when I did my podcast tour to help promote the tour or promote the podcast and to kind of spread the word of it and look for new topics and meet new contacts, which I did all of that during that time period. But this time, though, I did make sure that I stayed overnight. I camped in the park, so that gave me more time to explore. There's quite a few structures at the CCC built there, but also the Gooseberry Falls themselves. It's a series of 3 falls, the upper, middle, and lower falls, as the Gooseberry River descends down to Lake Superior. This park is also on the shores of Lake Superior, so it's not just the Gooseberry River and the waterfalls. There's also much more land. It was originally constructed. There was 623 acres. I have it in here in my information that I'll mention later. But now it's about 1,600 acres. So it's 1,000 more acres than what was initially established in 1933 when the park was initially beginning to be developed. So this park is pretty unique. The structures in there is what attracts me as a historian, is that they are stonework, fascinating stonework. These large rocks, granite, and another rock called gabbro rock. I've never heard of that before, but that's what it's described as or mentioned as on one of the CCC or one of the state park interpretive panels about the work of the CCC there. So I have to look that up more. I took some geology way back in college, but we're looking at 35 years ago or so. So it's something I'm a little sketchy on. So I'm not so sure about that one. But So I camped overnight there. I hiked the falls. It was August. It was hot. I was seriously out of shape. I still am. So it was tiring. So I didn't get over to the other side of the state highway that goes through Highway 60, where there's many more hiking trails, including the Superior Hiking Trail, which is the Minnesota segment, or this part of the Minnesota segment of the North Country National Scenic Trail that I love dearly, and I want to try to hike in all of the states of it. But So I did explore quite a bit and a lot of the structures that were built by the CCC. And that includes one that I'll mention further in here, but a castle-like concourse at the highway that was built as a parking area with stone crenellations, grand staircases, and ramps. Also, there were picnic shelters, stone and log picnic tables, stone drinking fountains and pillars, a water tower, and an ice house. Now, unfortunately, there still is no video for the podcast, but if you go to my YouTube channel, I said no video. If you go to my Facebook page, Rob Berg environmental historian, and I'll have the link in the with the show notes here in the description. But I will put together a whole bunch of photos of the work at Gooseberry Falls State Park there, so you can get an idea what it all looked like. But before we get into about the work at Gooseberry Falls, I just want to give a little overview about the Civilian Conservation Corps in Minnesota. Now, I had a couple of episodes on the CCC last season, and it was specifically about Michigan. So here we're going to go a little bit had some on the overall when I would Phil Nod on there, but here we'll go into some specifics on Minnesota. So during the time period from April 1933 until 1941, there were 77,000 enrollees in Minnesota. Forestry work in 2 national forests and 21 state forests were done. The 2 national forests were Chippewa and Superior National Forests, and they were already created. They were some of the early ones done in the earlier 1900s when Theodore Roosevelt was president, and they were expanded by the CCC. There were more than 123 million trees planted by the CCC in Minnesota. I mentioned that Michigan had over 484 million trees, so not as much as Michigan, but still, that's a lot of trees that were planted. Minnesota, as large of a state that it is not as forested as Michigan. It's really kind of the northeastern, the eastern part of Minnesota, but the northeastern is where it's mostly pine forest that was affected by logging, the greatest area of it. So then to the west of it and the south is more prairies, and in the west you're already even kind of getting close to where the Great Plains begin in the Dakotas, which border Minnesota to the west. There were over 275 million fish stocked. Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes, so a lot of fish, and the rivers in there as well. So fish rearing and stocking of fish was also a very important job of the CCC. There were 149 fire towers built by the CCC in Minnesota. I've been on 2 of them. I don't know which ones were actually built by the CCC, but in 2001, I visited both the Forest History Center in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, a site that I'll talk about later in this season, and then also at Itasca State Park, which is the headwaters of the Mississippi River. Each one of those places had fire towers that were open to the public to climb up 125 feet or taller. I don't remember the specifics of the Itasca, but I think it's 125 feet at the Forest History Center. I was in much better shape in 2001 than I am in 2026 or even last August in 2025. So I did not climb back up the fire tower then. I left that to younger Rob. There were 3,338 miles of telephone wire strung by the CCC. Now, this is not the telephone wire from your house out to the out to the main poles along the street, and then, along kind of a regular telephone network line. And for those of you who only know cell phones, you're wondering what I'm talking about telephone wires in your house. But no, this was actually telephone wires, lines that were strung between fire towers and ranger stations, and it was used for communications in the forest with sighting for forest fires and relaying the information on the location of where it is, so they could go out there very quickly to try to extinguish the fire before it got too large to where it would damage too much. There was also soil conservation work done on more than 16,000 acres. The 30s, especially from about 1934 to about 36, 37, was the Dust Bowl that really hit in North America, particularly on the Great Plains southern Great Plains from Texas and Oklahoma, going up into even including Canada, into the southern prairies of Canada, and where it was years of drought and sand blowing because of poor farming activities, where they were plowing up everything and not having tree lines to kind of help knock the wind down, and it just caused a lot of wind erosion. And so with soil conservation work, they did a lot of planting of trees for windbreaks. They did terracing of fields to kind of help to stave off some of the erosion from runoff. And there's places you can see that I saw it in eastern Nebraska and western Iowa when I lived out in Nebraska, work that was initially done by the CCC boys. So they did a lot of work in healing the land, not just planting trees that we think of here in the northern Great Lakes region. There was also work where they developed or improved national monuments in Minnesota. The Pipestone National Monument in southwestern Minnesota, that was an important Native American heritage site where they gathered the pipestone, that was the clay that was used to make the pipes that they used for peace ceremonies and other ceremonies. And then also the Grand Portage National Monument up at the very northeastern tip of Minnesota on Lake Superior, and it was where the Northwest Fur Company, a Northwest Company, was a fur post in the British period up until the change of the border between the United States and British Canada after the American Revolution, and it was where the kicking off point or stepping off point for the fur traders going into the interior of Canada and getting into going from the portaging from the around the Pigeon River, which was the border between Canada and the United States now, but it had a lot of severe rapids and waterfalls, so they had a 16-mile portage, and it started from Grand Portage, and that was a fur warehouse, basically. It was fortified. It had walls around it, but it was not a fort. There was no military activity there, but it was important in the North American fur trade. And then when the border between United States and British Canada was kind of solidified, the post was moved up further north to what's now Thunder Bay, Ontario, but was then, they created Fort William. And it was also Northwest Fur Company, but because of now the international border, it was fortified as well, and they called it Fort William. But anyways, that's stuff that I'll talk about at a future point in the website, in the podcast. I wanted to get to Grand Portage, but I wasn't able to do so on this last trip. So, and then finally, state park development, and that includes, of course, Gooseberry Falls State Park, Itasca State Park, as I mentioned, the headwaters of the Mississippi River, Jay Cook State Park. That's a very nice state park in Minnesota. It has a beautiful swinging bridge in there. And so a lot of work that was done by the CCC in Minnesota. But so I'm going to jump in here now about Gooseberry Falls State Park. And its history dates back prior to the creation of the state park. As I mentioned, in 1933, property was purchased by the state of Minnesota for the establishment of the park. It was not dedicated until 1937. That was typical of any type of park development. You don't dedicate it till it's nearly complete, till it's open to the public. So a little background here. In 1910, residents were promoting government involvement in recreational facilities. Now, this is from one of the interpretive panels at the park. By 1925, 4 Two Harbors men brought state officials to the waterfalls and urged the state to purchase the land for future generations. Two Harbors was the nearest decent-sized community, a little bit south down the shore from Gooseberry Falls, so it's the next biggest town. In the 1930s, the Departments of Highway and Conservation, the National Park Service, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the U.S. Army helped create the park. And so that then, of course, 1933 came the Minnesota purchased 638 acres to create Gooseberry Falls State Park to preserve the area around the upper, middle, and lower falls of the Gooseberry River, also making it a tourist attraction for auto tourists along the newly opened Lake Superior International Highway, now known as Minnesota Highway 60. The new highway allowed access to an area destined to be the retreat of the camper, the inspiration of the artist, the paradise of the sportsman, and the haven of the sweltering leisure class seeking relief from the summer heat. There's no attribution to that quote, but I think it came from some form of Minnesota tourism publication. It sounds like the type of writing they would do. In 1934, CCC Company 1720 established a tent camp near the Upper Falls. This would have been in May 1934, and their initial job, besides they built a picnic area, they built trails, but they also built the permanent camp nearby. So it would have been the typical lumber and tar paper buildings that were commonly used for construction purposes for CCC camps. And in the fall of 1934, they were replaced by Company 2710, which moved into the permanent camp in a blinding snowstorm. So I think this might have been in November, as Gordon Lightfoot famously sang in The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, the gales of November come early, when he was singing about Lake Superior. And this camp would continue to be used until July 1941. Most places I see the ending of the CCC to be April of 41, but in this case, the park or the camp held on until July. Not sure how it was used, or who was there near the end there, because as I mentioned, most CCC boys or companies were dissolved no later than April of 1941. Sorry, 1942. So this would have been before that. Boy, I'm totally off today. So sorry about that. So that is even before Pearl Harbor. So it shut down before the end of the CCC period. Yeah, sometimes we have brain farts even when we're talking on the air here. So the camp would be used until July 1941, as I mentioned. During the time, more than 20 stone and log buildings and other permanent structures were constructed. Landscaping and plantings also contributed to the unique character of the park. And the men, not only did they work at the park, they fought forest fires along Minnesota's North Shore. And many times they were sleeping out in the field for more than 2 weeks at a time. And here's a quote about some of the forest or the firefighting by Harvey Reichart, R-I-C-H-A-R-T, a enrollee of Company 2710. We were knocking down brush and trees and digging a trench. We tried to keep the fire from spreading. It was hard work and long hours, and you come in so tired at night. You slept in hay barns. You went to sleep and didn't know anything. So yeah, it was tough work. Anytime I have read or have heard uh, you know, a CCC boy talking about his experience fighting fires, it was all similar. It was hot. It was dirty work. It was tiring. There were a few of them in places that lost their lives, but for the most part, they came out of it unscathed, probably some minor burns, but nothing that they ever talked about. Um, but yes, getting back into the park construction, which is really the whole reason why this company existed there, developing the park. The main construction work was the building of the many stone structures in the park. The red granite and dark gabbro rock that gives the park buildings their unique appearance were quarried by CCC men at sites near Duluth and East Beaver Bay. Skilled masons directed the actual cutting and placement of the stone that was used for both the walls and interior fireplaces as well. So, as I mentioned, gabbro rock, not sure what that is. The most ambitious project was the construction of the massive stone concourse next to Highway 60 on the west side of the Gooseberry River. More than 300 feet long and up to 25 feet high, it served as a retaining wall, parking area, and overlook. It took more than 4 years to complete. An enormous derrick with a 40-foot boom was constructed by the park's blacksmith, Pete Mertez, and located at road level at the top of the concourse to shift cement, mortar, and rock to the lower level and cut stone up to the concourse for placement. So they brought the rock in from I guess it was the red granite that came from Duluth area, and then the blue gabbro came from the East Beaver Bay, and they came in just as raw rock, and then they were dropped down, or by derrick down to the lower level where the masons, the stone masons, and I'll mention their names here in a minute. Well, here I can just jump to it right now. The masonry work was supervised by local experienced men. That's what they called the local men hired by the Seas. Italian and American masons, John Barini and Joe Cattaneo, and a Swedish American, Axel Anderson. So they were the ones who supervised the masonry work, and they taught the CCC boys how to cut steel or stone, how to make mortar, how to place the stones and fill in the gaps of the rock with the mortar there. So it still stands to this day. So they did that part on site. So that was with the concourse, but they did that stonework with all of the buildings there in the park. The second building constructed by the CCC boys was the refectory, or picnic concession building, overlooking the mouth of the Gooseberry River. It was started in late 1934, with work continuing through the winter. The distinctive architecture of this and the other buildings included both native logs and stone materials. And here's another quote by Harvey Reichert. We mixed the mortar in the dead of winter, and that mortar on those rocks is just as good as it was 60 years ago. And so this was a quote from a 1994 interview. Probably his other quote came from that same interview. The masonry work, as I mentioned, supervised by the local experienced men. One of the park's architectural gems is the gravity-fed water tower. The stonework encases a 10,000 gallon steel tank that supplied the water needs to the lower park. It was completed in 1936. You wouldn't believe that I had just written all of this, as if I was reading it cold. But I should have rehearsed this, 2-3 times. So sorry for the rawness of this. Another quote here, Bernard Penner, the work foreman for Company 2710. The boys did the electric and plumbing work. We ran a mile from the camp to the campground with water lines. That was all put in by the boys. And they always called them CCC boys. They were young men, usually 18 to 24. So the CCC did a lot of work there, and there were a lot more work that they did besides just those 3 structures. There's a numerous amount of what they would call refreshment buildings, not as in a concession, but as a for campgrounds, it would be where your bathhouse, your showers, your restrooms were there. They did picnic shelters, many of them that were enclosed, and some that were open, but all of them had fireplaces in there, so they did the work for on the fireplaces in there as well. So I mean, these are fantastic buildings. They built picnic tables, stone picnic tables. They're not being moved anywhere. Where I saw them, that's where they were placed. Now we're talking 90 years ago when they were constructed. There was in a little outdoor amphitheater, they had benches that had stone pillars with half logs run across them as benches for seating for people to watch nature programs out there in the state park. Drinking fountains, so those water lines that were being run, they also ran little smaller lines to drinking fountains, and they were in stone and with the water pipes going up into it. And there's one spot in the little beach bay area there by where the river comes in. They have these stone pillars and with big heavy chains looped from one to the other. It was all strictly ornamentary, no actual practical use for them, but it was just some of this great stonework. And so where many men who joined the CCC, they learned important skills in the seas. And so you know that the boys at in Company 2710 at Gooseberry Falls State Park, one of their most important skills was masonry, was stonework. And it's always been a kind of a small industry. And now we're talking in the 21st century. It's really very much so a dying industry. I have a friend from high school who works as a restoration carpenter and stonemason in Chicago. And I know he's always looking for people who can do that work. So if it's something that you know how to do that, there is work for you because there's not a lot of people skilled to do that work. But so there's, it's something that has always been a unique skill. And for whatever reason, Italians were always the most popular stonemasons to have. I guess a lot of stonework in Italy. I mean, all of Europe, there's a lot of stonework, and I've never been to Italy to see it, but that seems to be the Italian immigrants that came to the United States. Those who were stoneworkers, stonemasons, really had their jobs set up for them. And so when you needed somebody to teach you or to teach others how to be stonemasons, those were the men you sought out. And I suspect that these men probably came from Duluth. It's a good-sized city on Lake Superior. Largest city, I think, on Lake Superior. And, of course, it doesn't compare to Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo. But it's a fairly good-sized city for on the Great Lakes as a whole. Oh, and, of course, Toronto in Canada. Sorry, folks, to forget you. But so, and then there was Axel Anderson, as I mentioned, the Swedish American. And, again, lots of ethnicities everywhere in the North Country. Wherever there was work, there was men coming from different nationalities to do that work. So these men were hired to train, to teach the boys how to do that work. So there would have been men that were, good axemen, lumberjacks that could have been working with the seas as a to teach how to log. And that's somebody like Axel Anderson. You're going to more likely find a Swede or, in Michigan, a Dane who would do that type of work. And so just again on a refresher about the Civilian Conservation Corps, I didn't mention it here in the beginning, just the work that was done in Minnesota. But the CCC was created by Theodore Roosevelt, by Franklin Roosevelt, his administration in 1933 after his inauguration. And it was part of the New Deal to put men back to work. And the men had to be on relief. as I mentioned, ages 18 to 24, though there were different classifications of exceptions. The veterans companies of the Civilian Conservation Corps, they were veterans of World War I and occasionally the Spanish-American War. And so they did work, and a lot of the work they did was the same as what the young men were doing. They were probably just doing it a little bit slower, being somebody of advanced age now, at least compared to the junior enrollees. So there was that. There were the Native American camps, the ones that were run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And there were actually a number of them in Minnesota. Up at Grand Portage Indian Reservation, they did the work on the Grand Portage National Monument. There were a number of CCC camps around by the reservations in other parts of Minnesota. Net Lake is one of them. I think they had one at Red Lake, down at Mille Lacs. There was the reservation there. So there were a number of the Bureau of Indian Affairs camps. And they also could be of any age. And with also being any age, they could be married men as well, where the junior enrollees had to be single. And they had to be on relief, regardless of which classification you were. And with the junior enrollees, there was also the what they called, and this is strictly, I'm saying this for the historical aspect, and this was what they called them at the time, the colored camps, the African American camps. From 1935 on, the CCC was segregated nationally. Now, prior to 35, there were integrated camps in some places, not everywhere, but I know in Michigan there were a few of them, and then they created the all-black or all-African-American camps in 1935, although there had been some specifically already. And then in other parts of the nation, it was always a segregated program based on the local concerns there. So those were like the junior enrollees. They were 18 to 24. And I say 18 to 24, that was the official age, but you'll hear of men that joined at 16, at 17, some as young as 15. They would, use their older brother's identification, or they would, fib to the labor officer who was doing the recruiting, or they look the other way. And some of them stayed in a little bit later. I've heard some go to 25, but usually those that were there after 24, they were probably hired by the camp as one of the local labor foremen, as an LEM there, and that happened often. A man could serve up to 2 years in the CCC as an enrollee, and then could continue on if he was hired by, as permanent camp staff. And if they were married, if they met somebody and got married, they were no longer allowed to be in the CCC. It was meant for them to be home and helping their family, helping their wives. And speaking of helping their family, they were paid upwards of $25 to $27 a month, depending on the jobs they had. But they were expected to send about send all but about $5 of it back home. And if they were orphans, then the money would be kept in a savings account for the men, and it was then available for them when they left the CCC. But this was an idea that not only were the men able to get work, get paid for it, and they were fed, they were housed, they were clothed, they were given an education, trained in jobs, and sometimes academic education. Many had never even finished their 8th grade education, which was usually the bare minimum requirement, was get an 8th grade education. Some went to high school, but if you were in rural areas, the high school might be in town and you can't get to it. So 8th grade was where you made it to. So they were able to complete that education, complete a high school education, get a GED, and some were even able to take college courses. And at Gooseberry Falls State Park at the camp, they had what they called the Gooseberry Falls University. It's their nickname for their education building. And they had these teachers, these educators, that went from camp to camp teaching, classes in there, overseeing the education. Many of them were taking correspondent courses. So this person, usually a male teacher of some form, and he would, check their grades, check their marks, make sure on their progress, but teaching specific classes as well. So it was a way to kind of well-round them. But then the money going home was important for the families, because then they had money that could get off of relief if they needed to, and they were then had a regular check coming in the mail every month that had money for them, that they could clothe other children. They could make sure there was food on the table. So it helped everybody in that. And yes, there were the detractors who considered it a socialist program. And I won't get into any of that here on this. I just know it was a helpful program. And for these young men, they did not know that over the horizon, in December of 1941, we would be drawn into the Second World War with the attack on Pearl Harbor. And then so many of these men volunteered for the Army, the Navy. The Army Air Corps was part of the Army at the time, the Air Force, and of course the Marines. So these kind of gave them the upper hand because of the skills they were taught. They were in good physical shape. The camps were run by Army officers or Reserve Army officers, naval officers at times too. And so they were provided jobs in them, but they were given kind of not a military training at all. There was no marching, there was no shooting, no learning about, but they were given that sense of authority, discipline. That's the word I was trying to say. They got good military discipline, and that would allow them to kind of be a step ahead of other recruits when they joined the service at the outset of our involvement in the war. So, as I mentioned, the camp actually ran 1933 to 1941, not 42 as somehow I had it in my head. So I apologize for that muff there. At least I caught it before I had recorded all of this. But so the when the camp closed, when the park was first dedicated, at the dedication of it, this says 1938. But it may have been more of a formal dedication came then. But here is a quote. It is our sincerest desire to make Gooseberry Falls the foremost state park in not only the state, but the nation. And we look forward to a bright future for the area itself and the entire North Shore. And that's from Edwin S. Kay, National Park Service in 1938. The National Park Service oversaw all park construction development by the CCC, regardless of if it was national parks or state parks. And then when they were state parks, they were then turned over to the state, whichever state it was in at the time of dedication. And here's a final words on the park here. Here lies a state park that will live in the years to come as a tribute to the nation's CCC and a monument to Company 2710, its officers and its boys. And that's from CCC Company 2710 Camp Newspaper. It was their epitaph for the camp. I don't have a title for the camp newspaper, but many of the camps had their own newspaper that also gave work for the boys to train, work as learning how to use printing presses or mimeograph machines, typing. They were also writing, giving a chance to practice writing skills. So this camp had one just like other camps. And so when the camp closed, this was the epitaph to the camp, to Company 2710, and also for the work they did at the state park. So that's, in a nutshell, is some of the work that was done by the Civilian Conservation Corps at Gooseberry Falls State Park up in the North Shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota. It's a beautiful place, and it's right along Highway 60, which is the main highway that goes from Duluth up to the international border at Grand Portage into Ontario, Canada, and then continues as an Ontario provincial highway up to the Thunder Bay, Ontario. which was originally Fort William, as I mentioned, and Port Arthur. It was twin towns that they merged together in the 1960s. But that's for another time, another story, another trip that I will make through that part of Ontario at some point, and probably do a circle tour of all of Lake Superior. But so that is this episode today. Hoping you learned a little bit about Gooseberry Falls State Park. If you're in Minnesota, you're probably well aware of the park. It's a beautiful park. And yeah, unfortunately, I only got to one part of the park. Stayed at the campground, visited the picnic area, saw the water tower, the ice house, a lot of the other work they did, a lot of picnic shelters. But when you go, you need to stop at their visitor center, which is not a CCC building. It was constructed in 1996, and it's modern amenities in there. It has a park store. It has exhibit hall. I didn't go in, but it has an auditorium where there's a program of film shown in there. And in August, it was fantastic because it was air conditioned, and it's a very busy place. And before I went to the visitor center, I took a walk down to see all the falls first. And I walked around, I saw the lower falls, the middle and the upper falls. And when I walked back from the upper falls and the concourse, I came out to the visitor center there, and I had went in and I got an ice cream, and I came back out and I saw a man sitting at the bench. And he was holding the leash of a dog, and the dog had a collar on there, and it had a 517 area code. Now, that's a Michigan area code, and that is not far from where I live in Chelsea. It's just to the west, Jackson County, going up into Lansing, and up a little bit further north before the 989 area code starts. But so I see him and I said, "Oh, so where in Michigan are you from?" I see the 517 area code, and he said Grass Lake. And I had to laugh because I'm from Chelsea. And if you go 7 miles west from Chelsea on either Interstate 94 or Old US 12, which turns into Michigan Avenue when you hit the Jackson County line, you come to Grass Lake. So Grass Lake is just 7 miles away from Chelsea. So here I am, I'm running into somebody who's practically is a next door neighbor, and he and his wife were staying in Two Harbors. They were at a music festival. I don't remember what kind it was. It was a traditional instruments. I want to say dulcimers, but I can't remember for sure. But so they were doing some day trips from there, and they had come up there, and his wife was inside the visitor center at the time. And so I chatted with them. We were in the shade for a little bit and found out that we knew mutual people, or at least one time when I knew more people in Grass Lake. And so it's just showing it's a small world. And also found out that just a day or two before, I had one of my college friends, he and his wife and daughter, they were traveling around doing the Lake Superior Circle Tour. And they had been there just a day or two before I was. So I missed them by just a couple days. So you never know when you're traveling of the small world that you're going to, run into people that you know. And it's part of why I love traveling when I do these podcasts, not just something I'm getting out of a book, out of archives, off the internet, but I'm there, I'm experiencing it, so I can tell you more about that. And yeah, it's a fantastic place. And I am not getting paid or not having any sponsorship by any type of Minnesota tourism organizations. Maybe someday I'll get some sponsorship like that, but I just want to know that these are places you need to go. And I'll talk more about Minnesota throughout the podcast season here. As I mentioned, things are a little up in the air because of how I took a delay in starting with my hiatus because of my mom's death. But I'm back doing it, and I'm trying to fit in episodes here and there. And so next week, I know what I'm going to do next week, not a surprise one like this one was. And that episode will be The Big Wild, Michigan's Pigeon River Country State Forest, Part 2, Jimmy Carter and Forest Recreation. So thanks for listening into it today. And as always, if you like the show, please tell a friend, pass on the word. It's the best way for this to grow. And if you really like the show and you want to help us out with a financial donation, click on the support button, and for as little as $3 a month up to $10 a month, you can help pay some of our bills that I have with the podcast that will ensure keeping this on the air. So things like subscription fees, music rights fees, things like that will help this continue to be on the air and to grow. So thanks again for listening in this week, and stay tuned next week for another episode of North Country History with Rob Berg. I'm Rob. Thanks a lot. Bye. North Country History with Rob Berg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Berg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Berg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Berg, Environmental Historian.